This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I'm very confident today. This is a competition, remember. I'm confident.
Oh, it sure is. And look, I'm confident as well, which means that we are both confident and we're going to need an adjudicator to decide who is going to win. Of course, the weekend show is all about us each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. The adjudicator, as always, is the permanently impartial, unimpeachable Adam Lang, our colleague from Fear and Greed. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael, and good morning, Sean.
Oh, he's a bit of a cheat sometimes. Oh, geez, that slipped out. Sorry, Adam. Didn't mean it.
That was in
I'm
the recording, Sean.
I'm still smarting from the last couple of weeks. I threw my toys out of the cot. I'm resolved to be better behaved this week.
Can I just say, Adam, did you know that Sean was still complaining about your adjudication about 4 days after you delivered it the other day?
Yeah, I think I was present on ones on day 3, but I did hear about further discussions, further rumblings later.
I would never complain. I trust you. All right, let's jump into it. Sean, what was the biggest story this week?
Oh, markets. It's pretty easy, this one. It's been a wild ride on Wall Street with US inflation this week coming in at 8.3%. Down, down, down seems to be the mantra across financial markets, though there was a bit of a bounce late in the week. The local market, the ASX 200, fell below 7,000 points. That's the first time it's done that in more than 3 months. Let's just take the tech companies. In one day, Xero fell 11%. On the ASX, it's now half of what it was at the beginning of the year. REA is the biggest of the tech stocks on the ASX. It's down nearly 40% this year. Software group WiseTech Global, it's down 36%. Seek's down nearly 30%. It isn't just equities, Michael. The Aussie dollar fell back below 68.5 US cents this week, though again it rebounded somewhat. And cryptos have been hammered here and overseas. Many of the currencies themselves have depreciated. Bitcoin fell as low as 28,000 US dollars a unit this week. It's about 1/3 of its value of late last year, but it's broader than that. The largest US cryptocurrency exchange, Coinbase, was also sold down, with its share price falling 23% in just one session. Then there's Terra USD, the algorithmic stablecoin. Note the word stable in stablecoin. That's at risk of complete collapse because the crypto it's tied to, Luna, has fallen off a cliff. Crazy, crazy week in markets.
Sean, remember last week I said I'm never going to let you go first again on the biggest story of the week because you always just grab the biggest story straight up, and then I'm the underdog right from the beginning. And it happened again. I completely forgot about my resolution last week. So I'm heading into this at a bit of a disadvantage because that is a massive story. All of those pieces together is a massive story. But Adam, listen to this because perhaps the next biggest story this week, which is also a big story, is the election campaign because there's only one more week to go. And you can really kind of see it in what's happening. The policy announcements are getting bigger. They're getting more expensive. The coverage is getting more intense. And of course, there is the debates as well. We had 2 of them this week. The first one on 9 was really a bit of a mess. Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese did a lot of arguing, a lot of talking over each other. There's no clear winner on that one. The final debate on Channel 7 was, I would say, much more civilised. General consensus was that Anthony Albanese won that one. Big issues on the campaign trail this week have been minimum wage increases, diplomacy with China, what would happen in the event of a hung parliament. We've seen more of Barnaby Joyce this week. He got a nosebleed mid-speech. Even former Prime Minister John Howard's been getting involved. Look, this time last year, the Australians news poll had Labor just in front. It was 51 to 49 on a 2-party preferred basis. Now it's 54 to 46. Labor is taking a huge lead into the final week. But as we've seen before, Scott Morrison is a pretty incredible campaigner. So prepare for an intense final week. In fact, I'm actually going to get in early right now, Sean, and reserve this as the biggest story for next week. So even if you go first next week, you can't take this one.
Fair enough. Adam.
So, Michael, it may well be that you need this one next week. I'm sorry, you've lost this one. I get it. Election campaign, debates, wages, prices, geopolitics. Yep, they're all massive stories, but the markets and this crazy week is bigger. Sean, you did an interview on Monday with Scott Haslam. He described it as brutal, and it has certainly been that. There has been carnage around the world. Currencies, cryptos, commodities, everything's getting hammered, and it is a spectacle. So I think you get it for the biggest story of the week.
Thank you, Adam. I love you.
Yeah.
We're back.
Did you just say you love Adam?
I do. Always have done. Terrific fella.
This is
I
just
was only a temporary.
Yeah, it was a temporary breakup. We always knew we'd end up back together.
yeah. Up until he rules in favour of me for the most remarkable story.
Go on. What is it? You go first this time. You're complaining about me going first. Go for it.
All right, I will, because the most remarkable story this week is the fact that one of the biggest players in the gig economy signed a deal with a union to regulate the gig economy. So food delivery company DoorDash has operated here for the last few years, but in the US, it's actually the biggest delivery platform in the country. The Charter of Principles signed this week between DoorDash and the Transport Workers Union is really, it's the first of its kind. It talks about the flexible nature of the industry while agreeing that an independent body needs to be set up to establish some industry-wide standards. The reason why I think this is so remarkable is because they did it themselves. This wasn't the result of changed government policy or anything. In fact, it actually puts pressure on the government to change the rules around the gig economy, things like fair pay and overtime. Menulog last year started a trial of direct employment for its delivery workers. So you add in this development this week with DoorDash, and it just feels like the gig economy might be gearing up for a pretty major overhaul. I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, I think that's remarkable too. I'm not conceding, but I do agree that is a remarkable story.
It sounded like a concession. Go on.
Not at all. No. Not when I've got one, about $195 million being paid for a silkscreen of Marilyn Monroe by Andy Warhol. Now that's remarkable. That was sold at Christie's this week. I'm sure you know the one. Marilyn with yellow hair and blue eyeshadow, pink face, big red lips. Iconic and extremely expensive. In fact, the price, $195 million US, was the highest ever for a 20th century artwork to sell at auction. Certainly the highest price for an American artwork and the second most expensive in history. Now, I asked you during the week, Michael, whether you knew what the most expensive painting sold in history was. Without a moment's silence, you didn't even have time to Google it. You said, yep, Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi. Remarkable that was, that you actually knew that.
I know my art. I'm a very cultured person. Sorry, Sean.
That one sold for $450 million US. In fact, this is doubly remarkable. The fact that someone's paying $195 million for a silkscreen, and the fact that you, Michael, knew what the most expensive one was. Adam? Oh, actually, can I throw in a couple of special mentions? One, remarkable performance of tobacco companies at the moment, including UK-listed Philip Morris and British American Tobacco. We all thought they wouldn't be around in 2022, but they're actually growing as they push into vapes and those sorts of things. Also, the return of the Marcos dynasty to run the Philippines. I thought that was remarkable. Neither of those are in the competition, though, Adam.
Thank you for the mentions. God, this is hard. I love Andy Warhol. I love Marilyn Monroe. The artwork is amazing. But I'm going to have to give this one to Michael for its business impact, because this is really the gig economy getting ahead of regulation again. And DoorDash Charter of Principles with the Transport Workers Union, I think, is a remarkable development. Tough call, but I'm going to give this one to Michael.
Tough call, but the right call. So well done, Adam.
What's worse than a poor loser is a poor winner, Michael.
No, I am being quite magnanimous here. I'm acknowledging the good performance by everyone involved here. But look, okay, we'll be back in a moment, and we are going to find the sleeper story of the week. All right, Sean, we're looking for the sleeper story, so one that maybe isn't getting the attention that it deserves or is going to become a bigger story further down the track. What was it for you this week?
Look, I think the biggest problem facing the global economy, apart from interest rates and inflation, is China, and the fact that it is not quite going backwards, but its growth rate is slowing so much. Now, this week, the World Health Organization warned that China's stringent zero COVID strategy isn't sustainable given the highly contagious Omicron variant. China dances to its own beat, but the fact that the major World Health Organization, which China has actually begrudgingly supported throughout COVID, more so than most other UN organizations, the fact that it comes out and calls for change may be the breaking point. Xi Jinping at some point has to drop that policy. Otherwise, the economy, the Chinese economy, could well and truly start going into recession, and you'll get so much social unrest in that country. It's not sustainable what he's doing at the moment. A big part of the problem for China is that their vaccines don't work particularly well. Also, vaccine rates are relatively low. Authorities have to shift, but they face a dreadful dilemma. US and Chinese researchers this week warned that lifting all restrictions in China without boosting vaccination rates and access to better treatments would trigger 1.5 million deaths in the next 6 months. It's an awful dilemma for Chinese authorities to be in. The fact that this week the World Health Organization came out and almost insisted that China change how they're thinking about it kind of gives Beijing an excuse to do it. I think this will be the beginning of a change in policy in China. Very, very big call. I appreciate that. But that's why it's a sleeper story for me.
Yeah, no, it is a big one, actually. Look, my story this week is a sleeper because it didn't actually get much attention here in Australia. It involves a company overseas, Aviva, which is a multinational insurance company based in the UK, led by Amanda Blanc, who is a very experienced executive in the insurance sector. She joined Aviva as its first female CEO in 2020. So this week, Aviva held its AGM. It was the first one in person since the pandemic. One investor at the AGM told Amanda Blanc that she was not, and I quote, not the man for the job. Another investor talked about her predecessors in the role and asked if she should be wearing trousers. Another investor at the AGM congratulated the board on its gender diversity and then said, again a quote, "They are so good at basic housekeeping activities. I'm sure this will be reflected in the direction of the board in the future." This is at the AGM of a major insurance company. I just find that quite remarkable. The chair of the company slammed the comments, but afterwards, Amanda Blanc actually said that this kind of behaviour has only gotten worse as she takes on more senior roles. For me, it's a sleeper story, partly because it didn't get much attention in Australia, as I mentioned, but also because it highlights the extraordinary sexism that still exists in business at a global level that you think should be eradicated by now. The fact that this kind of offensive, wrong, and just plain stupid comment is still being made in 2022, mind you, says that we still have a very long way to go.
That one couldn't make the sleeper and the remarkable story, Michael, categories.
Yeah. I was blown away when I saw it. I thought it's just, how is that possible in 2022?
I'm still gobsmacked about those comments. I agree with you. But in this instance, I have to say that Sean wins. And in part, I have to give a really good acknowledgement. What a great headline within his story. Dreadful dilemma. Very good. But China slowing economy through shutdowns and strangled supply chains, to me, is not just a sleeper for now, but this one's going to keep coming. And I think, Sean, you might be right. So I'm going to give this one to you. If there was a disgraceful category, I'd give that to Aviva.
Yeah, far and away. I wonder whether women wouldn't be quite as surprised or find this quite as sleepy as we do.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah, don't know.
Also, I wonder whether as well, perhaps Australia is slightly more progressive in this space, because this is obviously a UK company. I would have thought that Australia and the UK would be fairly closely aligned on this kind of thing. So I'd like to think that it wouldn't be happening here, but hey.
Wouldn't it be great to get Jen Duke on and ask her whether she's surprised by that story? Because maybe it is a function of three blokes. Anyway, let's get on to our favourite story, Michael.
All right. Okay. Look, no, why don't you go first on this one? I'm going to finish up for us today.
Okay, look, CSL, I love that company. It's essentially a blood collection business, really, really good one, in fact, the best in the world. This week, it won an appeal against a US court decision that will allow it and other plasma companies to challenge a ban from the US Customs and Border Protection Agency on Mexicans donating blood. Now, look, CSL has about 15 collection centres in the US within walking distance from the Mexican border. Mexicans walk across the border with their visas, give blood, get paid and walk home. They've been doing it for years, even during COVID. But that was stopped by the ban, which has only been recently introduced. Now, CSL has won the right to appeal the ban. Why do I love this story? Because it's just a real-life yarn about one of Australia's biggest companies and how it operates on the ground.
Yeah, it is a cracker. It's a cracker. But for me, the favourites, and this is obviously very subjective. This entire episode is very subjective, but I'm just going to appeal directly to Adam with this one. Because really,
I like it.
Adam, you are the only person that matters to me right now. Look, I love a good tech story. I know you do too. And when it's about a product as iconic as this.
Sorry, before you go on, this is high risk. You are appealing to Adam's technical ability. Whoa, high risk. Go for it.
It is a very good. I've got faith in Adam's technological ability.
Yes.
Which
go on.
Might be misplaced. Look, this is a story about a truly iconic product. So it was always going to end up as my favorite story of the week because after 20 years and 450 million plus sales, Apple is ending production of the iPod.
Oh no, that's a disaster. That's the one that Adam's actually used to. 20 years on, he can work the iPod.
He's just figured it out, hasn't he? Look, the thing is though that and the reason why this is so significant, and the reason why it's my favorite is because before the iPod, you listened to a Walkman or you listened to a Discman and you might have kind of 15 or 20 songs, and you suddenly went from there to having 1,000 songs on shuffle. But it was actually kind of more than that. It didn't just change the way people listened to music, but Apple at the same time was almost revolutionizing the way the whole music industry worked, essentially creating the first legal model for digital music when obviously piracy had been such a major problem up till that point. Now, of course, we've got the iPhone, we've got music streaming, iPod's a little bit redundant. But Adam, as a music lover, as a former music industry employee, I know this is one of your great loves. This would have to be a pretty sentimental time for you. So, look, I say we call this not just the favourite story, but the sentimental story.
Or the least favourite story, potentially.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I think Sean's story is a ripper, actually, and Australian companies going overseas and some of the challenges that they can have to navigate. In any normal week, that would probably be my favourite. But in this one, and I'm trying not to be just biased to my own history here, but I was, of course, around when the iPod came out. I was at a conference when it was launched, and the fellow from Apple got up in front of a whole music industry in Cannes in France. And we watched as he did this and just understood the gravity of impact on pirated music. But the reason why it's going to be my favourite is...
Sounding very objective so far. Go on.
Yeah, not personal at all.
But I just love Adam being at a technology kind of conference as well. I can kind of picture him as the one then with like the pitchfork and the torch kind of leading the way to bring technology down. Go on.
Follow the red umbrella. The Steve Jobs at Apple, when he returned to Apple, was the only one who could get the whole music industry to finally license music for digital sale. So he was the catalyst for 99 cents a song on Apple iTunes. Without him, it wouldn't have happened. Without the iPod, that would have happened. It's actually saved the whole music industry, I think, in terms of the recorded music side. So for that reason, it's my favourite story of the week. Well done, Michael.
Thank you, Adam. And would you say because it is your favourite, it's worth 2 points?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, I think it's 2-2. Am I right in saying it's 2-2?
It's 2-2.
Okay, look, we'll take that. Are you happy with a draw, Sean?
Yep, fair enough. I love the iPod story too. No problems there.
Do you want a tiebreaker? You too?
No.
Okay.
No. Oh, Sean's sounding a little bit shirty there.
Can I just give a special mention to Sean, you giving Michael a new nickname, a new middle name, in fact, Michael Magnanimous Thompson.
I think I gave that to myself, didn't I?
You did? Oh, sorry,
right.
Michael, you gave it to yourself.
Yep.
Genius.
Yep, that's right. All right. Well, there we go. And don't forget, if you like the way that this episode always seems to end up, which is all three of us laughing about each other's story choices, you can catch our weekly podcast called Safe Word by Fear and Greed. It is a lighter look at some of the business news around the place. It lives on its own. It's outside the main Fear and Greed playlist, so search for it on your podcast platform. Just look for Safe Word by Fear and Greed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and hit follow so that you get it every week. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.